Bitcoin not having a marketing is its greatest strength, but also its greatest weakness. You have all these people trying to spread the message, and it just sounds like a bunch of chatter.
Mining was my second engineering degree. I suddenly saw the world of engineering as a way of channeling abundant resources.
The mining in Oregon, it feels very like a part of nature. It's very like symbiotic with everything else.
Welcome to another episode of Hosting Bitcoin. Today, we're fortunate to have Neil Jacobs. Neil is a dedicated Bitcoin advocate and an educator with a very diverse background in finance, accounting, as well as marketing for some of the most well-known brands in our space. He transitioned from his role as a certified public accountant and became the head of brand engagement at Swan. And he's also the co-founder of FOMO21, a widely known and stylishly worn Bitcoin merchandise and apparel business. And he currently serves as the Chief Marketing Officer Advisor to Abundant Minds. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know Neil over the last few months and really excited to have him on and share some of his personal story and insights with you all today. To start out with, Neil, welcome to Hosting Bitcoin.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love, for the benefit of everybody who doesn't know you, to hear how you originally got into Bitcoin, because it was a while ago at this point. You've seen quite a bit, but a little bit of your origin story would be super helpful.
Yeah, sure. So in 2013, I was at a friend's house and he told me that he was using Bitcoin to buy drugs on the internet. And I was like, oh, what's this Bitcoin thing, right? At least this is what I first remember as my origin story. Maybe I heard of it before, but anyways, I'm like, oh, I want to find out how to get some of this Bitcoin, not to buy drugs, just because I was interested in learning about Bitcoin and figuring out what it was. So I created a Coinbase account in September of 2013. The price of Bitcoin was, I think, $122 per Bitcoin. And yeah, I didn't know what I owned. I held it on Coinbase, and the price it tripled really quickly. I think it ran up to 1,200 or 1,100 by November, but I think I sold it all the Bitcoin I bought it when it went to like $500 because I'm like, oh, I 3x my money or whatever. That's the normal traditional finance thing was going off in my mind. So I sold it. I didn't look at it again until maybe like 2015. I was looking to allocate part of my portfolio, my net worth, to things outside of the current system because I was kind of worried about the world. Now it's 10 years later, but even back then I was kind of worried about the world. And Trump was just stepped into running for the first time, and he was like a wrecking ball, like a bull in a china shop. And I'm like, the world's going to be in chaos. I don't know what's going to happen. So I discovered Bitcoin again. I rediscovered it. Might have been around like $500-$600 at the time. So I bought some, and I still didn't know what I owned, but I started doing more research, and unfortunately I started learning about other things like Ethereum, and I bought like cryptocurrency. There was an exchange called BTC-E, which was seized by the U.S. government at some point. But I bought like Litecoin. I didn't know what was going on. It was the whole unit bias thing, and I got into trading and basically became one of those like degen traders. In 2016 and 2017, not like the 100x leverage degen traders, but watching the charts, drawing lines. Oh, the Fibonacci levels, thinking I knew, I had it all figured out. But that was causing me a lot of anxiety. I did well in Bitcoin and Ethereum. So then you're like, oh, I'm going to find the next thing. But then you realize there are no next things. It's just Bitcoin. And I watched everything basically. I was probably up like 9-10x on my whole portfolio at one point, and it went down like 90%. And I'm like, I'm done with this shit. It's over. Even Bitcoin, I didn't understand. I didn't really understand it at that point, but I still held it. So that was like early 2018. Didn't pay attention. at end of 2019, I was kind of going through a career change. My former life is as a CPA. I moved back to Florida. Was looking to do things outside of the CPA landscape, but I ended up back at a CPA firm, and I was earning money, and I decided, all right, I'm gonna look at Bitcoin again. But this time, my third discovery, my rediscovery, I've heard people say like it takes multiple touch points to really understand Bitcoin. Three is like the magic number, and I guess you'd say this was my third time. And I started listening to podcasts. I the first one of the first podcasts I read or listened to was like end of 2019. It was Bitcoin Tina, um, on with CK, who used to be at Bitcoin Magazine, and I listened to this podcast, and it was a 4-part series, and I said, "Holy shit, you did not understand this at all. This is gonna change the world." So I started, I think I allocated maybe 10% of my net worth to Bitcoin at that point. So that's end of 2019. And then early 2020, I read Jeff Booth's book, The Price of Tomorrow. I think it's Why Deflation is Key to an Abundant Future, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
But um, and I had another like holy shit moment. I'm still like a full-time CPA accountant, and I'm like, AI and technology are going to completely take away my job, or at least reshape it. So I started getting more into a panic. I need Bitcoin now, not only because, okay, I wanted to, you know, allocate to something outside of the system, but this might be my only chance to grow wealth before my job and my skills are completely replaced. Fast forward all these years later, I've developed a whole new set of skills. I sound like what's the guy in Taken? I have a new set of skills. Liam Neeson. No, but I started getting more involved in the Bitcoin world in 2020. I started posting on Twitter, different content. I wanted to tell all my friends about Bitcoin. Like this is it. This is gonna change everything. And no, none of them wanted to listen, as a lot of people have experienced, especially years ago. Now it seems like it's a lot easier to convince people about Bitcoin, but no one wanted to listen. So that's really why I went on social media and started just talking to people. And people in the space started reaching out to me like, "Hey, Neil, would you like to do some work for us here? Would you like to do this? Would you like to do that?" And one of the things I started was end of 2020, early 2021. There was this social media app called Clubhouse, and this is a very long-winded origin story. I hope we have time, Bo, to go through all this like this.
There's infinite time. I hope
Infinite
this is a
time.
3-hour interview.
Oh God. Um, no, so there was this social media app, Clubhouse, and Swan Bitcoin was a company I became familiar with. I talked with Corey, the CEO, and they were hosting Clubhouse rooms about Bitcoin. And I had no idea what Bitcoin was, or not Bitcoin, what Clubhouse was. So I reached out to Corey and I said, "What's this Clubhouse thing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'll send you an invite." Because it was like an invite only app, it was a very like elitist thing back in the day. So I got an invite. I started attending these Clubhouse rooms. You could stay in the audience or go on stage and talk to people. I'd go on stage, I'd ask questions. But as it progressed, people started asking me questions. Like, I was like, "Why are they asking me questions? Like, I know what I'm talking about." I'm like, maybe I do know what I'm talking about now, or I know a little bit. And then I started for Swan, running Clubhouse rooms for them on a daily basis. I was still a CPA, so I'd wake up at 6:30 in the morning. I'd start Clubhouse rooms. 200 to 300 people would join them because it was early 2021. We were in like a raging bull market, right? And I would just talk to people about Bitcoin, tell them how they could buy it, how to, get their Bitcoin into self custody, really anything Bitcoin related. And that really started my journey. And I started like kind of growing a following on there, and then back on Twitter. And then I went to my first Bitcoin conference not until June of 2021 in Miami at the Bitcoin conference. And I wasn't really public facing at the time. That was an audio only app. There weren't even really any pictures of me. And people started like coming up to me, "Are you Neil?" I'd be like, "Yeah." uh, and that's kind of when I'm like, "Oh, maybe this Bitcoin thing's like maybe this is bigger for me than I thought. Maybe like this is where I'm supposed to be." And then it turned into having a podcast. I did a podcast called Inside Bitcoin for a year and a half. I started doing promotions for Bitcoin conferences all over the world. Uh, my merchant apparel company, FOMO21, started because someone on Clubhouse, my now business partner, Ryan, heard me on Clubhouse and said, "Oh, I've been listening to you for like a year or two. I've been in the merchant apparel space for 20 years, and I think you'd be the right person maybe to start a Bitcoin merchant apparel business." And fast forward, it's now almost 3 years. That's like my baby. And, wearing one of our shirts right now. And yeah, I have a super fun time with that. And then about a year and a half ago, I was talking with Corey at Swan about coming on to Swan full time. So I finally left my CPA life to enter the Bitcoin space, doing more marketing related roles, helping with social media, their affiliate program, um, anything marketing related. I was there to kind of like help. And as many people know, Swan had a big layoff about it was in July, so 6 months ago almost now. And I was kind of in no man's land. What do I want to do? I don't want to go back into accounting, CPA. So I started reaching out to a bunch of people, and I got connected to you, Bo. And now my life has certainly changed for the better. And Bo and I started talking, and I started working with Abundant Minds. And it's been a lot of fun, some growing pains in the beginning, for sure. But yeah, now I'm here now, and things are really starting to move, and I couldn't be more grateful.
I love that. We can double click on every single part of that. So I go back towards the beginning. What do you think it was about being in the realm of CPAs, private equity firms that gave you a unique view on Bitcoin, and maybe what entrenched belief systems in that world kept you away, or what do people in that world miss pretty often about Bitcoin?
Well, I think being an accountant, just understanding like double entry accounting and ledger systems, like Bitcoin just makes sense from a mathematical thing, right? You're an accountant, you understand like debits and credits. Oh, and Bitcoin, it's recording transactions, right? And it's auditing them correctly, right, amongst all the nodes. So there's a lot of accountants in the Bitcoin world. I think Pierre Rochard, I think Robert Breedlove was like a CPA, and there's other CPAs. So I think like the accounting background helped. I also was always kind of um, a go against the grain person. I thought, I would think the world wasn't fair. I'd be at this private equity firm in the accounting world, and I'd see like the kind of money back office accountants made versus the investment, people. And I'd be like, "What's going on?" I'm like I'm smarter than these people. What's going on here? And I always felt kind of like trapped. And yeah, I just I felt like at least for me personally, the society didn't feel very like merit based to me. Uh, but I couldn't put my finger on the why. But then you start learning about Bitcoin, you start learning about the uh, Cantillon effect and the money printer and things like that, and how the world works. And I think just being that background kind of brought me to Bitcoin.
What do you think it is that keeps people like accountants or people that work in private equity, people that deal with most of the money in the world, traders, investors, from understanding money itself? What do you think the disconnect is? Because they're always deeply embedded in the movement of the monetary energy. And yet, most people walking around working in the financial world have a really tough time or just haven't taken any time to understand the base layer of what money is. Why do you think that is?
I don't think it's strictly to like people in the finance or accounting world. I think it's a programming thing. from an early age. The same way you kind of just learn English, right? If you're born in America, it's just kind of embedded into you. You just kind of learn like money just becomes a part of society, and you never like question how it happened, how you just kind of learn about it. It's just you're taught, oh, prices go up over time. When my parents were younger, it cost, 25 cents to buy a slice of pizza and a soda, right? It's just, oh, it's supposed to go up. This is just what happens. And then you hear the Federal Reserve, we're trying to hit inflation, certain inflation metrics. And when you think about it now, it's like, that's freaking crazy. Like they're trying to debase your money on purpose. And we all just accept this. So I don't think it's unique to accountants or like people in the investment world. I would say maybe some of them have a harder time than maybe someone not in it because their life might be a little more comfortable and easy, right? I've heard sailors say this recently, like Bitcoin's on a need to know kind of basis. Like you need when there's pain in your life and you need to know about it, you learn about it, and that's definitely not true for everyone, but it's true for a lot of people. I've always said the type of what brings people to Bitcoin is curiosity or necessity, right? And that's kind of the need to know is the necessity part, but it's also just curiosity because not everyone comes here because of a need. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, what was it for you? Was it more curiosity or more necessity?
Well, both. I guess both. I guess the curiosity, I'd say the greed and number go up falls under the curiosity side of
Hmm.
it. Because definitely in 2013, it was a curiosity thing, and then it wasn't really. It was like, yeah, I wanted to make a quick buck, but I wasn't thinking like I'm going to get rich doing this. I never thought about that. And then 2015 up until 2018, it was like the trading days. So that was like the greed and the number go up. So it wasn't really until like 2019, 2020 where it became a necessity for me to where I was like, oh, I don't want my wealth stolen from me by governments. And then it was like, oh, I also want a hedge slash insurance policy slash safety net against technology moving at a rapid pace. So it was both of those things.
What do you think was because you had a long learning journey yourself and you were exposed pretty early on and then several times thereafter? And then it seems like overnight or very quickly, you became a very prominent educator in the space. Probably didn't feel that way to you, and it was more of a gradual thing. But what was the shift for you beginning to teach about this and really spread the word? How did that change your view on it?
Yeah. When you lay it out like that, it's like, dummy, you were here in 2013. Why didn't you figure it out back then? Uh, just as it was a lot harder to figure it out back then. Now there's so much materials and books and podcasts. Back then, there were like if you got lucky and stumbled upon maybe Max Kaiser or Andreas Antonopoulos. I think he was around in maybe 2012 or 2013, but there wasn't that much resources available. In terms of me like educating and advocating for Bitcoin, again, it was just none of my friends wanted to listen to me, so I just wanted to find like-minded people that wanted to talk about it. And I guess the way I talked about it with some people and then people listening to me resonated with people. So it happened naturally. I never set out to have a job in the Bitcoin world or to teach people in the Bitcoin world. It was just something I was passionate about and wanted to talk to people about. So I kind of feel like it's my destiny, to be here because it wasn't forced. You and I have talked before about like setting goals and things like that. And for me, it was like the Bitcoin world was never a goal for me. It just kind of happened because I did something I was passionate about. So I would say to just anyone in general, if people say set goals or you're not sure, just try to do the things you like to do, and then like good things will happen. And I guess in a long-winded way, I kind of answered your question about how did I jump to the education part, and it was just enjoying it and talking with people, and it resonated with people.
I totally agree with that standpoint. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and he's talking about how, his life is totally different. He never could have predicted that this is what he would be doing this year. And I said, look, 5 years ago, I didn't even know that there was a such thing as a professional Bitcoin miner. And here I am, and that's my full time gig, right? So
Yeah, if you would have told me 5 years ago, all the things that would have happened in the last 5 years, I would have said you belong in a mental institution. Like you have no idea. Like this is not like what I would have said. No way. So yeah, I'm super grateful. I'm super like humbled by the whole experience. And just to go back, I'm not saying people shouldn't set goals. I'm not like anti goals. I'm just like, for me, it was always hard to figure out what those goals were. So if you're in that rut and you can't figure it out, just do stuff that you like. Um, and hopefully good things will happen out of that.
I agree. Totally agree with that standpoint. And sometimes you set your bar or you set your vision way too small, and it can
Yeah.
be way, way bigger than you think.
Yeah.
And I'm, I feel that way in my life. I had even up to a couple years ago, no aspirations to do what we were doing at Abundant Minds. And it wasn't until I had enough experiences come into my life to convince me that it was not only possible, but there would be a really good fit to go for something like that. I wasn't dreaming like that. So sometimes you need the world life to give you a little glimpse into what it could be that's challenging to what you previously said is what might be possible for you.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. Both of our journeys.
One thing that you've talked about recently that I've really enjoyed diving into is, we've talked about strategic Bitcoin reserves. There's all kinds of changes in accounting standards for Bitcoin companies, but you have beat the drum a little bit recently for removing capital gains tax on Bitcoin. And taxes are something that people scarcely understand, but I'm curious why you think that would be a reasonable and useful lever to pull in integrating Bitcoin into the financial world.
Yeah, so a few months ago, I wrote like an article like and capital gains taxes on Bitcoin. To me, Bitcoin's money. Treat it as such. It's really that simple. If we want people to be able to use it in circular economies, get rid of the capital gains tax. Now that might threaten the status quo. So people, and obviously the government wants theirs. They want to get their greedy, dirty hands on anything they can. But if you want money to work as money, then why are there taxes on it? I look at it as the dollar is debasing, so I'm being punished, right? If I want to spend my Bitcoin, it's because the dollar has debased, and now you're punishing me for wanting to use my Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, right? The Bitcoin hasn't changed. There's only 21 million. It's that you're printing more dollars, so my Bitcoin is worth more in your debased currency. So now I have to pay tax on that. It's ridiculous.
How would removing capital gains tax be different than a legal tender law, or are they close to the same thing?
Well, yeah, I'm not a legal expert, but my understanding of legal tender, it's just if Bitcoin's made legal tender, you're required to accept it to pay off any like debts you have as a business owner. But that doesn't change the classification by like the IRS or any taxing authority. I don't think by default. Um, so yeah, I think they're kind of two distinct things.
At what point did you make the shift to more of the soft skills, marketing, engagement, attention, awareness away from the much more black and white world of accounting and finance? And what drove that shift for you? Because most people don't go from accounting to something in marketing. That's a pretty unique journey.
Yeah, so I mean, I knew from the get go when I started my accounting career. So I was at a PwC, like Big Four accounting firm in New York City. I knew I wasn't like supposed to be there, like as my life's mission. There was always something like this is awful. This is boring. The reason I got into accounting is at the school I was at, I didn't have a goal then. I wasn't sure. And I just, oh, accounting's like a good thing to be in and it's part of the business school and I want to do something in business. Like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And that's really kind of like how I fell into it. It wasn't a lot of discovery. So I was in accounting. I was good at what I did, but I always felt stuck.
Mm.
And luckily, Bitcoin just by not by chance, I don't know, by chance, it just opened new doors for me where, again, it started with education. It started with being able to promote conferences, and I was good at it. And not just because I'm saying I was good at it, I just like results started happening. Um, and I've just always been able to relate to people on an emotional level. And I think that's really what marketing is. It's how do you relate to someone on an emotional level so they'll take an action, whether it's buy my thing, follow my thing, subscribe to my thing. It's how do I get them to do something? It kind of sounds a little like nefarious, but as long as you believe in what you're marketing and promoting, then like I don't have too big of a problem with it.
No, it's kind of like people. A lot of people don't like salespeople. They think it's a sleazy profession, and the difference is if you are getting someone over the line to make a decision that you know is in their best interest, then sales is the most honorable profession that you could ever be in. Same with
Yeah,
marketing.
it depends what you're selling and what you're marketing.
Exactly. Do you think it's a positive or a negative that Bitcoin doesn't have its own marketing department?
Positive. Do you want me to go more in depth? I mean,
Yeah, please.
we are its marketing department, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone that buys Bitcoin, it's in your incentive to market it, right? But I don't think like it's just, oh, I just need number to go up. I mean, that's part of it, but it's also, oh, I found this awesome thing. I want to share it with the people I know and love and help them.
You've done pretty full stack marketing level tasks and initiatives for Bitcoin companies. You've got a merch and apparel company. You've had a podcast in the past. You've really gone through a lot of different mediums in
Oh, okay.
reaching and getting
I,
the attention of people. Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
So I would just say take chances. Don't be afraid of what like anyone else thinks. I think I was for a while, and I could be a little bit of a perfectionist and not want to look vulnerable in front of other people.
Yeah.
But part of, especially in like the social media world today, it's about taking chances, making mistakes, knowing that there's always going to be someone saying you're an idiot or this is stupid or or hateful things or mean things, and just know that like it doesn't matter. You're doing this for you, and don't be afraid to take chances and don't let other people, get you down. You don't want to. My biggest regrets in life are when I listen to other people instead of going with my gut. Um, and even now, I hate to call it a regret because I needed those lessons in order for me to get to where I am. But if I was to say it was a regret, it would be when I listened to other people for in any aspect of my life. And that could be friends, that could be close family too. And it doesn't mean you don't love them, right? If like you don't listen to your close family because your gut's telling you about something, it's just you have to find your own way and go your own path. So don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to mess up. No one really gives a shit that much about any one of us. They'll be on to the next person, criticizing the next person, in like an hour. They're going to forget about you, even though we internalize it, right, as human beings. Just take chances and don't think that anything is out of your range of capabilities. You could always teach yourself. You could always learn. I definitely, it was a blessing and a curse. My like growing up, my mom would always tell me like, you could do anything, this, but then it always also makes you like a perfectionist. Like you expect you're able to, but it also like opens your mind to, you're able to really do anything. And I really taught myself, okay, starting a podcast, I taught myself the editing, the recording, the buying the equipment, even though I can't get this mic to work right now and it's more like of a prop. um, yeah, graphic design for the merchant apparel. 90% of the designs you see, I did. I like taught myself how to do the graphic design, and that was never part of the deal. But I wanted to grow the business faster, and I was getting annoyed with the graphic designers not going quick enough. So I'm like, I'm going to teach myself how to do it. So it's just, we all, I really believe like we're all capable of so much more than we think. And you even say to me, about limiting beliefs. And sometimes when you hear that, it's like, oh, I don't want to hear that anymore. But to a certain extent, it's really true. We're all capable of so much more than we think. There are obviously limitations. I'm not 7 feet tall. I can't dunk a basketball. I'm never going to be able to dunk a basketball. Like that's like, I'm 5'8". That's a that's a limitation of the laws of physics. Um, but in the end, most people have such a broader range of capabilities than they can even imagine.
The sinister part of limiting beliefs is not the ones that you're necessarily aware of and that you've been aware of for all of your life, like, your height if you were aspiring to be a basketball player. It's usually the ones that don't come up consciously and that you're not even thinking about are limiting you. Like a lot of people have limiting stories around money because they just rarely ever examine their relationship with it. Or, like you said, limiting beliefs around what they can do in life. And when those beliefs are uncovered, addressed, and released, it's such a freeing and opening experience. Like it genuinely feels like you've unlocked another dimension of reality that was always available to you, but you just couldn't see because you had this opaque film of glass over what you thought you were capable of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still guilty of it today. Things will enter my brain. I'll be like, no, Neil, like, stop it, And sometimes I let it take over. I'm not, the Buddha, right, or whatever. I'm not some like spiritual monk. Um, I have my moments, and I try to say, anything that like gets into my head, it's like this too shall pass, and like just keep going. Um, and yeah, just always, just never give up.
So I love that you said just try things because that's very much the entrepreneurial journey and I resonate with that. But when you came on board with us, we had a lot of decisions to make around what the Abundant Minds brand would mean. And you were very sincere and serious, and I appreciate this about you, about not doing anything that would compromise the brand, even if it meant a short-term victory or an increase in machine sales or whatever it might be. And I'm curious for you, what does it mean to have a great brand and why is that so important?
A great brand means trust, and if people can't trust you, they're not going to spend money on anything you're like shilling or promoting to them. So a good brand means trust, integrity, all those words, but it's true. If people can't trust you, they're not going to listen to you about anything? Your reputation is it really means a lot. As long as, look, no matter what you do, some people, whether it's your business or you personally, some people are never going to like you or your business. But as long as you're doing you know the right thing, let that be like your north star.
Bitcoin mining allows you to acquire Bitcoin at a lower cost than buying Bitcoin outright and produces consistent results. At Abundant Minds, we take care of setup, maintenance, and performance so that your miners can run efficiently. It's a straightforward way to grow your Bitcoin stack without the guesswork. Book a call to start now. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's a Bezos quote. He says, if you want to be universally liked and not ever make anybody angry with you, you should never try to do anything new or interesting.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I always say, like, When someone is like liked by everyone, there's usually like there's something there that's off. It's like, have they never stood for anything in their life, right? Like they're just, are they lying to everyone? Are they just trying to appease everyone? And I don't know. It's just, that's definitely a red flag for me. When you're not, when someone isn't upset by your actions or what you say, uh, you might want to revisit, what you're doing.
One of the most kind of obvious examples of where brand matters is in apparel and merchandise. And you see the same t-shirt in Walmart for $2 that someone is happy to pay $200 for if it's got a Gucci brand on it. Why are people happy to pay so much more for a standout brand?
Yeah, I think, see, I don't know how much, I think it really depends on the type of brand. I think people buy like FOMO 21 merch because it makes them feel good because they want to spread a message. And
And it
then
is a
some people,
standout brand.
what?
It is a standout brand.
Well, I appreciate that. But some brands just have more. It's more about brand loyalty. Some more, it's about you know cost differentiation. There's just a lot of different things. So it's not a simple answer. I would just say again, there has to be trust
Hmm.
in any brand. If I send
Maybe a
someone, if I
maybe
send
a
someone,
better prompt. A better prompt for you would be I respect Richard Branson a lot. And he said if he had to start over with nothing and pick one thing to absolutely be masterful to go from zero to $1 billion again, that the one thing that he would pick as most important to master is brand. Why do you think he said that?
in a world that's like global and there's so much competition, it's really like one of the few edges you could have is a brand because anyone could almost like replicate what you have at this point. There's not a lot of limitations there. So if someone connects with you on your brand, they'll trust you. They'll keep coming back to you. So that's what I would say. Just due to the vast access we have these days, your brand needs to differentiate itself above all others. That's why it's important.
That's a beautiful answer.
Good, because it was a tough one to really, I've never thought about it. It's funny, a lot of these things I do in practice, but I don't think about abstractly. So thank you for keeping me on my toes.
Of course. And on the back of that, you have founded and grown an outstanding brand. And I'm curious what it was that inspired you to get into FOMO 21 and how is it that you see something like merch and apparel influencing Bitcoin adoption and the culture as we move forward?
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, my business partner Ryan reached out to me about it and said he had a lot of experience. So with like his experience and my audience, that we'd make a good team. And I just wanted to like start a new business. Oh, it was in the Bitcoin industry. It was not going to shitcoin. It was cool. I almost had it written in our original agreement, like no shitcoins ever between us. I don't think we ever wrote it because like once I spoke with him enough, I knew okay, he's like a legitimate Bitcoiner. Um, but what I really like about, I was never going to be a cryptographer or a computer scientist. It just didn't interest me. The stuff is interesting, but it didn't interest me to go like that deep of a dive. So it's like, how do I make my impact on the Bitcoin world? It's like, oh, well, merch. If I can, if someone could wear one of our shirts and spark a conversation somewhere, like that's me helping get the message out. I like to say I get to bring Bitcoin memes to real life, right? I see the memes and it's like, boom, I got an idea. Now to go from like concept to design is sometimes a little challenging, but yeah, if I could affect like Bitcoin adoption in like 0.0001% way, you know, through the merch, I'm happy about it. Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun. It's one of the most fun uh, businesses I could think of. You're literally bringing people like joy and happiness. They love it. Look, not every customer's happy, but like 99% of the customers have been happy. And you see them, I see them at the conference wearing it. That's like the coolest thing. It's like seeing your child, like, doing well. I see like people wearing the merch, and it brings me like such like a happy feeling.
With the podcast that you did with Joe Carlasare, was that also the mission of which being to get the message out to orange pill people, to bring more people onto this technology, or if not, what was the purpose of that chapter?
That's an interesting question. So I had a few people reach out to me about doing it. Then Joe reached out to me, and I'm like, oh, Joe'd be a good person to do it because he's a smart guy, and he could talk in a way that on things I can't necessarily talk about. He'll be the brains, and I'll be the pretty face of the podcast. Um, and so we just kind of like started, and I'm like, oh, this will be a fun thing to do. Maybe it'll catch on. Maybe it'll be really big. Um, I was doing all the editing, I was doing all the marketing, all the editing. It was an exhausting process, but a good learning experience. Yeah, there wasn't. At a certain point, it became. To be honest, at a certain point, I was just getting tired of it, because it's a lot. It's
Mm-hmm.
one thing to show up and just do the interview, but all the things that goes into like most of the podcast. Like if you have guests, like booking the guests, making sure everyone shows up, making sure this idiot's microphone is working, right? Like going like there's all these different things, and then marketing it and clipping it and coming up with shorts and making sure that there's subscribers there. There's a lot that's going on, and it's an exhausting process. So at a certain point, I didn't like it anymore. It was a lot for me to do on my own. I'm not saying I wouldn't do a podcast in the future, but I would definitely buy back my time and have other people, do the production and do a lot of that stuff. Um, so at a certain point, it's good for me to have my face out there to help grow my personal brand. So I kept doing the podcast probably like 6 months longer than I really, maybe a little longer than I even wanted to, but I knew it was good to be out there. And it's still, I was learning. Anytime you talk about concepts in economics and Bitcoin, you're constantly keeping yourself, up to date. So I knew it was good for me, but I didn't really enjoy it at a certain point, and then it kind of ended for a few reasons at the end. So
What do you think was the biggest benefit to you doing it, both for yourself as well as for your audience? Like, why would someone create and do a podcast?
again, it kind of it helped me break out of caring about what other people thought of me. We all back in the day when like voicemails were really a thing, and you'd hear your voice and you'd be like, oh, I hate how I sound on this voice, right? And I used to be like that. And now I just kind of, you get to an acceptance point, and it removed a lot of fear. It's helped me with public speaking. I'm definitely not great. I still have crutch words that come in from time to time, and I'm consciously aware when they happen, which is funny. It allows you to grow as a person, because an audience is going to be viewing this. You get to not worry about the judgment of others. At least it helped me in those areas. And then obviously learning all the technical things about setting up a podcast, all these some of those like more hard skills then help you. Oh, I want to put out a funny meme, but it's a video. Oh, now I know how to use this editing software. Like all these things build up. Oh, now I learned about design for my t-shirts using Canva. Oh, wait, I could use this to make memes on Twitter, or so they all build on each other. So many skills that I've gathered throughout my life, when I was doing them, I thought this is useless or this is annoying. And then sometimes 10 years later, I go back, oh, wow, I learned this. I could do this. So that just comes with like time, experience, and taking chances on, right? Like do as much as you can.
Did any of your skills translate to being directly involved in mining?
I guess in a cop out answer, I'd say everything that I did led me to this one point, right? Getting into the mining world was a big jump for me. Like I said, I never wanted to work in the Bitcoin world in the first place. And part of that, as I became more involved in the Bitcoin space, I it was a lot of fun for me, and I didn't want it to become work. So it literally took like 3 years for me to even go from normie CPA world to Bitcoin company. And then obviously at a necessity, when I was laid off from the other Bitcoin company, it's like, what's available now? And then when I spoke with you, I was like, oh, Bitcoin mining. But Bitcoin mining always had like, was always a negative in my mind for retail people to, because I was, a lot of people, there's a lot of scams in the Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
mining world. We know. And it's a tough business. Even if it's not scammed, it's a tough business. So it was always kind of put into my brain like, stay away from mining, stay away from mining, stay away from mining. But then when this opportunity presents itself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep like an open mind and learn more about it. And you and I talked. You seemed like a person of high integrity. And then when I met more people at the company, they seemed like people of high integrity. Then when I flew out, about a month into working at Abundant Minds, a little over a month, flew out to our facility in Oregon. Did I say Oregon right? Um, you go there and you're around the miners and you hear the humming of the miners. And luckily, because it's colder in Oregon, you don't have to deal with like really loud fans when it's not like the dead of summer. You don't even need like the headgear. You just feel that it's very zen being out there, and you're literally listening to money being made, and it's a really cool experience. And I thought to myself, a lot of Bitcoiners, once you get like hardcore into Bitcoin, it's like, sell my chairs, do this. Like I have to live like a nun. And for me, it's like, oh, this is just like another avenue to another thing to explore. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. Like I'm only buy Bitcoin. You know, I'm only in Bitcoin mining. It's like, oh, I could expand into this other cool thing. And let's be honest, if Bitcoin mining didn't exist, neither would Bitcoin. So yeah, I've just it's grown on me, and I really wasn't sure. Like that's the honest truth. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, I remember really vividly because I mean, good for you, and it was well deserved. You had no shortage of options when you were in this kind of limbo period. And I know you had other opportunities in mining, you had opportunities that had nothing to do with mining. And I would love to know what it was that made you think, yeah, I'm going to do this, because you really could have done anything at that point. You had a very strong personal brand. You'd worked with one of the most well-known companies in the space at a high level. Like, why a small mining company in the Pacific Northwest?
Now we're running an ad for Abundant Mind. So I don't know. I'm just kidding. No paid me what I'm about to say. No, I'm just
Roll
kidding.
tape.
No. Um, you actually see you were very real and kind of down to earth. And not that other people aren't like that I talked to. I've talked with a lot of different people, and you just had your heart in the right place, and we got to an understanding, and it felt right, And at the time, I'm like, I don't know how long this is going to be. It's gone longer than we initially planned for. Not that we didn't think it could go longer. So we're already in our like second inning. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. And now things are really starting to move. You could see. And we're getting the right people in place to do great things. And the sky's the limit.
Before you had any exposure to us or just the option of getting into the mining industry, how familiar were you with mining?
I was familiar in the fact that I could explain it to someone coming in on a superficial level, like to someone new to Bitcoin. But I would always defer to other people if it had to be explained on a very technical level. I still probably would, but I definitely know a lot more than I did before. And like I said, until you actually go to a mining facility, you you can't really understand. Like I've been around like an ASIC here and there, like on display or stuff like that, but until you're like at the facility, you really can't understand what's going on. So it opened up a whole new level for me. I unlocked a new achievement. And when you're in the Bitcoin world for a while, you don't really feel like there's many more unlocks, but there are.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I've said it plenty of times at this point, but mining was my second engineering degree, real world engineering degree, and it made it fun for me. I suddenly saw the world of engineering as a way of channeling abundant resources into this cool thing that hardly anybody understood, and most people, in fact, hated at the time that I was getting into it. It was a very misunderstood and mischaracterized industry in a lot of ways. And I saw it as this amazing tool that actually, if you studied it honestly, has the potential to save our world in many ways. So I absolutely love that.
And I loved your ambition about like conquering the Pacific Northwest and making energy cheaper. I'm like, is this guy crazy? No. But at the same time, like that's what CEOs, sometimes need that bigger vision. And it's like, oh, maybe it could like happen. I don't know. Like maybe there's something here, and good things we're seeing like starting to happen, and it's even within the first. It's been now 4 months. It hasn't been like always like perfect, but you could kind of see like things like really picking up, and we're really starting to hit a new stride. So it's exciting. And what you said before, it's very misunderstood, and that's the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
If things that are understood, there's no opportunity in things that are understood. It's the
It's
things
part
that
of why
are.
we do this. It's why we
Yeah,
do the podcast. It's why we
yeah.
do the education. This is not something that most people walking down the street have any familiarity with, much less like a deep understanding of. And I liken it to, like, in many ways, Bitcoin itself is a return to truth and things running in a sound fashion. And mining is kind of like meeting your rancher and like knowing where your beef comes from and getting more connected to that base resource that's so important, determines how your body functions, whether you're eating good beef or crappy hormone filled, stuff that you've got no clue where in the supply chain it came from. Mining is that like shake your rancher's hand in the digital space.
It is. And this might seem counterintuitive, but it really feels like the mining in Oregon, it feels very like a part of nature, even though it's like man made in terms of like, the containers and the actual equipment. It feels like it's very like symbiotic with everything else. It actually feels part of nature, and that's a really like insane concept because obviously it's man-made, right? But it really feels like it flows with everything there, so it's cool. Yeah.
I was skiing yesterday, and just took a picture of the mountain ranges, and it was apparent to me in that moment that most people looking at a mountain just see a beautiful snow-capped piece of scenery, and to a Bitcoin miner, that is future hydroelectric energy in solid state, waiting to power homes, power facilities, run the world. And it's man-made, yes, but the greatest feats of engineering that we've had through history, and Sailors talked about this ad nauseum, are channeling this energy that's already all around us into this very organized and orderly form that creates what appears like a very natural evolution that always could have existed and greatly improves everything throughout the system, not just human quality of life, but the quality of how the entire system functions.
It's funny how you say when you see something, you see mining in it, right? You see an opportunity. It's fun when I see things, I see marketing in it. I was at a Florida Panther game last night, and they had like a Star Wars theme night at the Florida Panthers arena. That's for anyone that doesn't know, Florida Panthers, they're a hockey team, NHL team. And I was there last night, and I really was like paying attention to everything. I'm like, oh, they must have had their social media guy updating this for this night. That's how my mind was. They have all the colors, they're doing the fonts, they have it. That's how my mind works. So I guess we're both exactly where we're supposed to be.
What, since you do see marketing all around you, what do you see as the biggest opportunities that aren't yet being taken advantage of, or, just aren't being taken advantage of to their capacity, either in the Bitcoin space or the mining space? A great example would be marketing the sustainability benefits of mining. How that was like poorly understood, and it took a few good thinkers and well-positioned statements and good research to change that narrative and really start pointing that ship in the right direction.
I mean, another cop out answer, but everything in the Bitcoin world is still like vastly misunderstood, and better marketing, knowing your audience. I feel like that's the biggest challenge. Bitcoin not having a marketing is its greatest strength, but also its greatest weakness. So it's its greatest strength, obviously, because you don't have any like central force making, central party like making decisions. But at the same time, you have all these people trying to spread the message, and it just sounds like a bunch of chatter. If you go on Twitter and there's someone, let's say a celebrity says, "Oh, could you tell me about this Bitcoin thing?" Right away, the cyber hornets, all the maxis, everyone comes in, replies. You have 800 replies, everyone coming at it from a different angle. No like coherent message, right? Which kind of like goes against most marketing. So it's really about knowing your audience. And I would just say this to all Bitcoiners: if you are talking about Bitcoin, you're not trying to convince yourself or to show how much you know about Bitcoin. You are trying to open up the other person's mind about Bitcoin. You are trying to connect with them. So in the Bitcoin world, it's just about crafting a message based on your audience. Um, Saylor is like a genius at this. He's a great marketer. He's an engineer, right? His degree is, I think, aerospace engineering.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also a great marketer. He could go and talk to anyone, anywhere, and really be laser focused. It's funny. He did that Microsoft, what was it, like 90-second presentation, and people were like, "This is awful. He went so fast. It was like in night. It's like or maybe it was 3 minutes he got. It's like he only gets 3 minutes. It's like no, he knew his audience. He is Microsoft gonna like change their ways? No, right? They're not in the need to know. But what he does know is if he shows 60 slides in 3 minutes, they're going to have to do their due diligence and look at all of those slides. It doesn't matter that he presented it in a rushed way. So he knew exactly what he was doing. And that's beautiful. That's knowing it wasn't about appealing to me or to grandma or to anyone else. It was about, oh, now they have this deck. If they don't actually review it, they're not doing their due diligence. And, they're going to end up looking really bad. We know Microsoft in the future for not doing this. Most people will forget or like write it off. But it's just about knowing your audience.
What's different about our audience now than when you were first exposed to Bitcoin? Who are we talking to now,
Oh my
2025?
God. Ugh. Me personally, I'm talking to anyone who wants to listen. This is kind of a different way to answer your question than you probably expected. But I'm talking to anyone that wants to listen, because a decade ago, No one wanted to listen, and you had to convince people. Now we're at a point where the audience comes to us, which is more so much easier than it used to be. So it's really anyone that has an open mind. Um, I don't want it to do a limiting thing like, oh well, now it's just for institutions, only institutions are here. That's where the big money's coming from. Yeah, obviously we're running a business, and when you're running businesses, you have to think of how to maximize the wealth for your shareholders, etc. Um, but just from a Bitcoiner perspective and just onboarding more people, it's just anyone who wants to learn.
Hmm. Those first 10 to 15 years, that was the early adopter persona that only the extremely curious or the very forward thinking people would even give you the time of day to listen. And now it feels more like kind of the early majority, which is a much larger group of people, but we're still at less than 1% of capital penetration in terms of the size of Bitcoin relative to everything else. So I agree with you. It's much lower hanging fruit to go for people that are already curious and already asking you about it. And it's such a larger swath of people now than it was even, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's enough people where you don't have to go and try to convince other people. There's enough big people, institutions, nation states, billionaires, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, organizations, pension funds. There's still most of them don't even like think about it, but there's enough that want to learn, and there's still such a small amount of us, right? People who want to teach them, that there's enough for us to do where we don't really have to convert people who don't want to be converted. People are already have an open mind. I mean, just I didn't realize that. Like, I knew conceptually 100,000 breaking 100,000 was going to be big, and right now we're at 105 based on my block clock. Oh, I unplugged it actually to plug in this microphone that I'm not even using. But we're just at 105 when we started this podcast. Um, I knew conceptually 100,000 was going to be a big deal, but it really has been a lot bigger than I thought. Just anecdotally, when I talk to people, even like all the skeptics are like they're going away.
Hmm.
In my I've always been in my family and friends like social circles as the Bitcoin guy, and so many deny, and now I'll talk to my mom or my dad and be like, oh, this person, they said, yeah, Neil really was right about this shit. And these are people for like years I was telling them. They won't say it to me, but some of them will. But it just can't be ignored. You can't say something with a $2 trillion market cap uh, is irrelevant or it has no value. You know, if you might, you're allowed to think this doesn't have value to me, but if other people do that, then there's value. There's value. Like, it doesn't have to have value to you. Water's valuable to you, but not if you're drowning, right? So, it's just people need to step outside themselves, the people who still doubt it and the skeptics.
Bitcoin crossing 100,000 is its own very important psychological landmark. But not only that, the whole surrounding environment is just wild. And if you are ignoring it at this point, you know, not only are we over 100K, which is 10 or 100x more than many people thought it would ever get to, you've got a president who's buying some for his media company. You've got senators pushing forward strategic Bitcoin reserves for the US. You have 5+ nation states around the world doing their own mining
That we know
uh,
about.
that we know about. Just a completely different tone in the conversations around this. And if you had said that 3 years ago, that, the incoming president would be speaking at the Bitcoin conference and looking at adding it to the national reserves. I mean, that in itself is just, it's not priced in at all.
Well,
It's
that
poorly understood how impactful that is.
Yeah, and that was the conversation. The conversations I was having 3 years ago were about things like this, but not 3 years from then. It was like, oh, maybe in like 10 years, like these things will start to happen. Maybe the most optimistic people, it was like 5 years, but it was more like even in 2021, a Bitcoin ETF to happen. What was it? The beginning of 2024. I don't think anyone really saw that on their radar to happen early 2024.
No. And
If
most successful ETF launch of all time.
Yeah. If anything, it wouldn't have been until the next administration came in, regardless if it was Trump. It was just had to be, most likely a Republican administration in the U.S. So the earliest anyone could have thought was 2025. So that happened a year earlier. And, people might think, oh, a year earlier isn't a big deal, but it is. I mean, Bitcoin, you know, we're on warp speed with Bitcoin. I tell people Bitcoin, because Bitcoin trades 24/7, there's way more price discovery in a day than there is in traditional stock markets. When the markets are open, it's like 6.5 hours, like the stock
Mm-hmm.
market. So it's 24/7 price discovery. So compared to like traditional markets, like yeah, Bitcoin's been around. What is it, 16 years now? It's really like 70 years in terms of how traditional markets, right?
Yeah, I
Like
was
it's
just gonna
four.
say I can't remember exactly what the stat was or when we crossed it, but someone put out there that Bitcoin has now been open for more continuous or more total hours than the stock market because it only
Maybe,
came
yeah.
out in like the early 70s where people could do live trading.
Yeah, it's almost longer than when we came off the fiat system. Maybe that was right in 1971 when we went to the fiat off the gold standard. I mean, in 1971. So the price discovery for Bitcoin has actually been more hours. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to do the math on it, but I think it might be.
It's like
Um,
if you had a university class studying all the world's information for 8 hours a day versus training a large language model on
yeah,
all of the world's
it's
information. It's just
yeah.
crazy how different that is.
So anyway, how I got to that tangent, saying like even something happening a year earlier is a big deal. But yeah, no, a lot of the things that are happening, I saw maybe like the end of this decade happening, like 2028, 2029, 2030, and they're happening now. And it's so it's weird. It's weird. It's cool. We're living history. It's pretty amazing that in all of human history, we're going through the monetization of an asset. Not many humans get to do that in real time and even understand that it's happening. We are super privileged to get to be part of this social experiment.
So we've been through a lot of wild change in a very short time, and it's impossible to go through that kind of change and not have some impact on your own personal belief systems, philosophies. What has your involvement in this community changed for you in terms of your personal philosophy or worldview?
I would say Bitcoin's all about incentives aligning. And I would say I take that and apply that to all parts of how I see the world now. Mostly follow the incentives. It's really kind of like a first principle thinking. If you want to like know why people are doing a certain thing, 99% of the time there's like an incentive reason because people are acting what they think is in their own like rational best interest. It may seem irrational. So it's really about incentives. So it's changed the way I look at economics and free markets, about human interaction. Follow the incentives.
If you had the chance to host a roundtable dinner with three people, alive or dead, and you get to discuss Bitcoin with them, what are you asking them and who are you inviting?
I guess the first person has to be Satoshi. Um, the second person would have to be Hal Finney. Not, I'll come back about the third person, but obviously Satoshi. It just seems like a slam dunk of an answer. For Hal, it's such a sad story. You know how he had to suffer. Uh, for anyone who doesn't know who Hal Finney is, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do. But if you don't, he was the one he received the first Bitcoin transaction from Satoshi Nakamoto. He passed away from ALS, which is a fucking awful disease, probably like the worst fucking disease you could have. Um, I just would want someone like him who was there at the beginning to see where it is now and hear his thoughts. He was so prescient about the things that are happening even today.
Mm.
His writings, some of them are like way more impressive than Satoshi about what he saw the future bringing. He talked about $10 million Bitcoin when Bitcoin had no value and was serious. Like, think about that. He talked about $10 million Bitcoin. Now, we're not at $10 million, but we all just kind of assume one day it'll get there. It's just like the timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That was not a common assumption at the time he was talking about it. Not
no.
even close.
Well, yeah, no. And I don't know if he said, oh, it's definitely going to happen, but he talked about like how it would work and banks custodying Bitcoin in the future and Bitcoin as a settlement layer and stuff like that. So that would be just amazing to be at a table with him. Yeah, alive or dead. I mean, I've had family members who pass away, so obviously having them at the table would be cool to just kind of like shoot the shit with them, um, see what they think of the world today. That's just kind of like a sappy answer, I guess.
Oh, it's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, so Hal Finney, Satoshi, and every family member that's died, anyone I know that's died, any family member, put them in that seat. Yeah, so it's a lot of
So
people on one chair, but we're all about one chair in the Bitcoin world.
I think that's a great answer. And if you have too many chairs, I see 3 chairs in my 4 chairs in my room, which is far too many. So definitely have some to sell. I could
Yeah,
see
I
two
guess.
of your chairs.
Yeah, and I'm sitting on one, so that's three. These are like more decorative stool chairs, but maybe I should sell them. I,
we gotta
I, I don't have company
we gotta
much.
tighten up. We gotta tighten it up here.
Yeah, that's
Um,
Bitcoin right there.
you had a really interesting journey, not just of learning about Bitcoin, but of giving more of your time and energy to the space itself and to really putting the energy of your career behind Bitcoin. What's the advice you would give to someone who's on the precipice of taking a similar journey, taking a similar leap?
Well, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I want to work in the Bitcoin space. I want to work in the Bitcoin space." Don't do that at the expense of doing something you're not going to like to do. So make sure if you do decide to change your job because of and get into Bitcoin, you still like what you're going to be doing. Just because it's a Bitcoin company, you won't make things better. In fact, you might resent like the Bitcoin world more. So make sure it's something you are passionate about doing as well. Fiat mining and turning that fiat into Bitcoin is totally just as noble. Um, so yeah, try things. Don't force anything. If what you're doing in the fiat world is what you love to do, like don't do that. But I guess to your point, you mentioned Jeff Booth. If that like conflicts with the Bitcoin ethos, that's a tough one. I would say you'll know when it's the right time. You'll know when it's the right time to kind of transition, and only you could kind of figure that out.
Beautiful answer.
Thank you.
Any closing thoughts we didn't get to? Final messages you want to leave people with that have stuck with us to this point?
Oh my god. I think we just ended on like an awesome note. No, just make sure to check out Bo on Twitter and Abundant Minds. good follows. We have a great team of people cranking out content. Yeah, no, I don't have anything to say. I'm really excited to see where Abundant Minds goes, where Bitcoin goes over the next 6 months. I think in the next 3 months, the things could look radically different than they do today, which is like crazy to think about. But then it goes to the whole like Bitcoin 24/7 price discovery, nation state adoption. Yeah, I'm just excited. Just make sure you're having a good time in the Bitcoin world. If Make sure you're having fun. You know, I tell people kind of like tongue in cheek, like I shit post on the internet for a living. Like that's part of it, right? There's obviously more than that. But just have fun, because if you're not like having fun, like what's the point really?
Neil, I am beyond grateful that you would share your time with me today and share your story with the audience, and even more grateful that you give your time and energy to this company. And it's absolutely an honor to get to work with you, and could not be more grateful that you were interested at all with being a part of this mission. And just want to say thank you. And before we sign off, let everybody know where they can find you if they don't know where to find you.
At Neil Jacobs on Twitter, NeilJacobs. I can't even spell my name. Also on LinkedIn, if that's your medium. Instagram, the real Neil Jacobs. I had to create a new account recently. Um, but yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Neil. Until next time, brother.